Thank you all for coming. This is great. Women supporting women and men supporting women. Can't forget you, Stuart, and others. First of all, I'm a public health researcher, epidemiologist. So why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? I'm a volunteer at the Oxford Library. Have people been there? The one-room little library in Oxford. And I was an officer too. To the right of this photo are several bookcases full of histories of the Eastern Shore. Well, I got curious because you'll tell from my accent, I'm from New York. So I started reading them. They were all about men. Nothing personal, but I thought there must be some women who did incredible things at the Eastern Shore. And so I started talking about it to my coffee companion, Mary Jordan, who's right here in the front row. And together we decided to do a class at the Chesapeake Learning Forum on historic women of the Eastern Shore, which happened last year. From there, anybody know Val Cavallari from public radio here? Well, she got us involved in interviews, and then she linked me up with a publisher. So I've been expanding what we did into a book that'll probably come out sometime this fall. This is not mostly my work. This is the work of a lot of people who've done research on these women that's been hidden. I have to thank Kyla Weber from the Talbot Historical Society, who went out of her way to help. And the other historical societies on the shore have been wonderful. And if you haven't visited any of them, you should. I want to thank also all the librarians who helped me. And I especially want to thank Becky, who helped here with my research, Becky Ricci, and Monique Gordy, who also went out of their way to help me. So I have some primary research, but most of it's secondary research. So let's get started and talk about the women. I have about 14 chapters now in the book of women. Starting in chronological order, with some pioneering women on the Eastern Shore in the 1600s. Ann Toft and Mary Johnson. Do people know about them? Ann Toft came over in the 1640s from England, single woman. She became friends with two powerful men on the Virginia side of the shore, Edmund Scarborough and a man by the name of Randall. Maryland started what was called head rights, where if you brought somebody to Maryland to settle on the shore, they got 50 acres of land free, and you got 50 acres of land free, because Virginia had its eyes on the whole Eastern Shore at that point. Well, she ended up with about 30,000 acres in Maryland, in Virginia, and Jamaica. And she had 3 children out of wedlock and never got prosecuted or anything. So this was one powerful woman, especially when you think the Eastern Shore at that point. This is a 1700 map from the Maryland Society of History and Culture, the Center for History and Culture. And I mean, there weren't roads, there were paths, right? There was water was the primary means of transportation. And this woman gamed the system. was incredible, what historical records show. And just as brave was Mary Johnson. Anthony Johnson, I learned about Mary through Anthony, her husband. Anthony Johnson was one of the first slaves in Jamestown. He came about 2 years after the settlement, they think. Mary shows up for the first time, I think in the 1630s in Jamestown. Somehow they both are freed, or free themselves, right? They free themselves, and they move to the Virginia part of the Easton Shore. Let's see, somewhere down here, where they start a plantation. They have 4 children. They're doing well. And Virginia starts to pass laws that regulate Black people. So they then move, they keep that plantation, but they move up here, where they start a second plantation, and Anthony dies. And the records show that Mary runs the plantation, and runs it so well that when she dies, she leaves cattle and others to her children. So there's no really commemoration of Mary Johnson that I could find as a place to drive to. But Ann Toft has a sign. Let me see if I put that in. No, Ann Toft has a sign on a road in Virginia on the Eastern Shore that you can see where her plantation was. And then I had to go to Talbot County, of course, and Virtue Viol was the last witch tried in Maryland, and she's from Plain Dealing Creek. That's our neighborhood. Our neighborhood near Bellevue, St. Michael's, that area. And she was accused of causing a neighbor to become speechless. And the county commissioners agreed, the attorney general agreed, and she was shipped to Annapolis to be tried. However, at least the sources I read said the neighbor then testified at the trial against her. So anyway, she was found innocent. And then Katie Colburn is rumored to have been a witch in the same area. She was deformed, excuse me. And if you think this is an ancient tale, Heather, I gotta get the last name straight, Heather Bracknell introduced legislation in the Maryland National Assembly last year, she's a representative, to have Maryland apologize for trying witches, because they were one of like a dozen witches tried. Stuart, do you know how many witches were tried?
I've lost count.
Okay. Anyway, so it's a current issue before the legislature, which is nice. From there, Talbot County, I moved to Queen Anne's and Elizabeth Harris. Are there any Quakers here? Because Elizabeth Harris came here, was one of the first Quakers to come here in the 1600s. She was a preacher. She preached and founded Quaker communities on the Western Shore and in Queen Anne's County. She made several trips. Can you imagine? The trips took months across the ocean. You were in crowded quarters, limited food. She made several trips here to start Quaker communities. And I need to learn more about her. So if anyone knows any more about her or can help, please see me afterwards. The other person who was inspired by religion to come here is Jarena Lee. Now, what makes her special?
Shakers? You part of the Shakers?
Excuse me?
Was she affiliated with the Shakers?
No, She was affiliated, well, that was a good guess, because they were starting about then.
And they have a league.
Right.
Something.
The AME Church was also starting then. And they did not believe in female preachers. Bishop Allen wouldn't give her permission to preach, but she did so anyway in Philly. She was born in New Jersey, moved to Philly. She was obviously African American, a free woman, and she finally got permission to preach when she was in the same service as Bishop Allen, and they were listening to a visiting preacher, and the visitor got ill and had to leave. So she got up and just started talking and speaking and preaching. And he finally admitted she should be able to go and preach the word in the church. So she went to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York, Delaware, and then she decided to go to the Eastern Shore as a free black woman in a slave area, slave state. And she was almost arrested once. She went up and down the peninsula and spread the word of God, which I thought was took guts, a lot of guts, just an amazing woman. Freedom fighters. Everyone knows Frederick Douglass. What about Anna Murray Douglass? Are you familiar with her? Excuse me? Yeah, she's Frederick Douglass's wife. Well, what did she do? She first of all gave him money they met in Baltimore. She grew up out in Caroline County, outside of Denton, in a very poor black free community, except free and slave community. She grew up in a household where her 7 older brothers and sisters were slaves. Her parents were emancipated while her mom was pregnant with her. So she was free, and I think it's 3 younger sisters, 3 or 4, also were free. Can you imagine growing up in a household where half the people are slaves and half of them are free? She moved to Baltimore to work as a laundress and a housekeeper. She met Frederick Douglass there. She took all of her savings and used it so he could buy a ticket up north. She also, some of the researchers say, even got him sailor's clothes because he disguised himself as some kind of seaman, went north. They married 2 weeks after he sent for her 2 weeks later, and they married almost immediately. Moved to Massachusetts, had children, then moved to Rochester, New York. Well, besides supporting Frederick Douglass, and she supported the family because he was a laborer. They were first laborers when they married, and then he became famous for his preaching. The income he got was very sporadic. So she became a shoe cobbler and a laundress to raise money for the family so they could get clothes made for him and educate their children, because they both believed in education. She was illiterate. He had taught himself to read. He was not, but she was illiterate. In her spare time, she was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And they even enlarged their house in Rochester for the Underground Railroad. She also hosted abolitionists, frequently women in the house, who looked down on her because she was illiterate. So I think she's a very brave woman. She needs to be remembered. Her daughter said she's the linchpin of the family, And I'm looking for, there was a talk at the library here previously by Celeste Marie Bernier and Bill Larson. Did anybody go to that? It's called The Revolutionary Lives of Anna Murray Douglas and her daughter, Rosetta Douglas Sprague. So there's lots of books on Frederick Douglass. We need more on Anna Murray Douglas. I can't say much more about Harriet Tubman. I mean, she's the most famous woman from the Eastern Shore. But I thought, I found this quote, and this was by Frederick Douglass. And I think it captures what she did. The difference between us is very marked. Most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I have received much encouragement at every step of the way. You, on the other hand, meaning Harriet Tubman, have labored in a private way. I have wrought in the day, you in the night. I have had the applause of the crowd and the satisfaction that comes of being approved by the multitude, while the most that you have done has been witnessed by a few trembling, scarred, and footsore bondmen and women, whom you have led out of the house of bondage, and whose heartfelt, God bless you, has been your only reward. I found that very moving. So the final two people here are Civil War spies. Anna Ella Carroll. You know, some people are shaking their heads. You've heard of her. Yes. Carroll family, Charles Carroll, descendant. She grew up in Somerset and then Dorchester counties. Moved to Philadelphia and then New York as the Civil War was starting. She moved to DC. She helped keep Maryland in the Union. She had a very unusual education. Her father, who was governor for a while, trained her to be his social secretary. She read law, she read the classics, so she was very well educated. So she was friends with the current governor, convinced him to move the legislature to stay in the Union. She then wrote a pamphlet about why the border states should stay in the Union, caught the eye of the federal government, who asked her for additional pamphlets, and she then went on, according to her story, at Lincoln's request, to go to the West and look at routes for the Southern invasion. And the Union was going to go down the Mississippi. And she said, no, don't do that. She wrote back to the Secretary of War. It's too well fortified. Take the Tennessee and Cumberland, some other rivers south. Don't take the Mississippi. She was a Civil War strategist. She also advised Grant. Now there's some debate because somebody else put the same proposal on the invasion in the New York Times about the same time, but this was supposed, that's fine, two people thinking the same thing. But this was one of her ideas. She then was involved in Reconstruction, and then after that, she asked the federal government for some reimbursement for all the work she had done in the war. I think they wanted to give her, I don't know how much a month. It was not much. She spent the rest of her life fighting with the federal government.
Harriet Tubman.
Yeah, Harriet Tubman had the same thing. She should have been reimbursed more. Her family had disowned her because when the Civil War started, she freed all her slaves, and they were slaveholders. So she got very little support from them. She ended up living in DC in poverty with a sister who worked and supported them both. And what saved her from completely fading into oblivion was that right before her death, the early suffragettes, Blackwell, wrote a biography of her life that became kind of a rallying cry for the early suffragettes on why women needed the vote. So it's a fascinating story. It's a sad story that she never did really get reimbursed for what she had done or recognized for what she had done. And there's a painting at Troika Gallery in which a modern painter, there's a painting of
Laura.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Well, go look at it. There was a Civil War painting by a carpenter on Lincoln and his cabinet at the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And she, what is her name again? Laura Era, painted in Harriet Tubman because he left a vacant seat and he left a shawl on the table.
That was Anna Ellen Carroll.
Oh, I'm Anna Ella Carroll. Yeah.
Sorry, I just need to.
So that's good. That was probably Anna Ella Carroll's. The other person here is Clara Gunby. She lived in Salisbury. She believed in the Southern cause. She refused to walk under a flag that the Union garrison there had put up. She was tried in Baltimore and sent to, or Annapolis, and sent to a Union fort on the Eastern Shore. There she met another woman who had information on a Union spy that was in Richmond spying on Jefferson and his cabinet. She was released in the last prisoner exchange of the Civil War. She made her way to Richmond and met with Jefferson and gave him the information. Jefferson was the president, right? Jefferson Davis. Jefferson Davis. That's what Jefferson Davis. Too many names. Jefferson Davis. She met with Jefferson Davis, gave him the information, and he gave her a position in the Confederacy government, which she stayed in to the very end of the Civil War. And she describes Richmond right before the invasion by the Union and right after. She has a diary that was found in the 80s, I think, and it's very moving, her description of what happened. So those are the first 5 groups of women I went through. Any questions? And anybody that has extra information, I'm still finishing this, let us know. Okay, Mary, do you want to talk about Mary? Go ahead.
I'll just add one. You go ahead.
Mary Elizabeth Banning. You've heard of, some of you have heard of her, I know that. Okay, mycologist. And her story reads like I was thinking Rip Van Winkle, you know how he slept for 20 years? Her manuscript slept for almost 100 years. Okay, in those days, women couldn't become, mycology or nature. She loved nature as a child. She loved nature as a teacher. She wanted to study mycology, which is the study of mushrooms and fungi. And I didn't know they formed their own separate kingdom from plants and animals. Thanks to Mary, I've learned all this. Anyway, hundreds of different species within their kingdom. She couldn't get into any college program on this because she was a woman. She wrote to the leading mycologists in the field who would not answer her. She went out and she first was on the Eastern Shore and then here near Plain Dealing Creek again. It must have been a really center for women in those days. She then moved to Baltimore where she had to support her sister and mother who were chronically ill. She went out and bought her own lab equipment, microscope, went out and bought any books she could find about mushrooms, and she wrote her own book where Mary discovered these photos. Anyway, just gorgeous, gorgeous pictures of mushrooms that I never even imagined. She sent the book to a mycologist at the New York State Museum in Albany. He put it in his drawer when he retired. She died. It was discovered almost 100 years later, in the 1980s. She had discovered 23 new species of mushrooms. This was one of the most thorough descriptions and renderings of them. And they were hidden. They were hidden. She died unrecognized. The New York State Museum, when they found it, realized they had a gem on their hands. They have an exhibit there of her drawings and her work, and they've also collected some of these mushrooms that you can see. So it's a bit far from the Easton Shore, but if you go online and Google Banning New York State Museum, they have a video of the exhibit that shows some of her drawings. So she was really one of the first scientists from the Eastern Shore. I'm still trying to find out who the first female physician was here. I haven't been successful. Maryland's first female voters. What year was the vote? Did we get the vote? 1920. Tennessee was the last state to pass it. Well, in 1908, a small town in Kent County didn't realize that women weren't voting. So they passed regulations saying they were, just as they were incorporated, they passed a regulation saying that all tax-paying citizens could vote. So 14 women registered. 12 white women, 2 black women. And then these 3 women voted in 1908, first women to vote in Maryland. Afterwards, I read the town passed legislation to say all male tax-paying voters could vote. So this was a one-time thing. But where the old town hall is, they now have a street sign you can see, a marker that gives credit to these women for being the first voters. I need to find out more about them. I haven't been to the Kent County Historical Society, but if anybody knows more, I'd love to know about these 3 women. From there, we go to public opinion changers. Nanny Melvin is in Caroline County. She decides, she moves to Baltimore as an adult. Well, first of all, she's a poet, and she publishes poetry. She marries the Dorchester, what's the main city in Caroline County? Yes, she marries the publisher of the paper there. They move to Ellicott City. They divorce, and she then moves to Baltimore and joins the Just Voting League of suffragettes to get the 19th Amendment to the Constitution passed, giving women the right to vote. She's the field secretary, and she concentrates on the Eastern Shore, and she went all over the Eastern Shore, going back and forth across the water when there wasn't a bridge. She talks about her winter voyages in the ice and cold, and she starts in Denton and forms clubs of rural women all along the Eastern Shore that address more than voting. They address social issues, economic issues. So she was a real key person on starting suffragettes clubs on the Eastern Shore. And then Mary Jenkins and Mary Bartlett Dickens were key in Talbot County. Now, everyone knows Mary Jenkins, right? Jenkins House, where the Talbot County Historical Society is. I asked Kayla if I could have a lot of background information on Mary Jenkins. And Kayla, you went down a rabbit hole, she said, right? We know a lot about the house. We don't know a lot about Mary Jenkins, is that right? Which is kind of fascinating, given that her house is so famous. Mary Bartlett Dixon was a whirlwind. What can I say? She not only co-founded the Just Voting League here and the suffragette movement, she also co-founded the hospital that became Easton Hospital. And in her spare time, she was a nurse. She founded the nursing school and also the League of Women Voters she co-founded. I don't know how she slept, but anyway. And finally, we have celebrity visitors. We have Annie Oakley, which everyone knows about, and you can drive past her house in Cambridge. And the Dorset County Historical Society has a little exhibit about her. She built a porch on the second floor of her house, which faced the water. They built the house, and she could shoot waterfowl from the porch. And Tallulah Bankhead. Back there were places to visit. Tallulah Bankhead was not from the Eastern Shore. She had a sister who lived in Kent County, in Rock Hall, and she would visit her often there and throw wild parties. And she and her sister were known for prancing around town with all kinds of company. She is buried in an historic cemetery in Kent County, as is Anna Ella Carroll I was thinking of. She and Tallulah Bankhead are, what did I do? Are buried, go back here, are buried in beautiful cemeteries.
St. Paul's Church.
Wait a minute, here we are. Here we are. Come on. Are buried in beautiful cemeteries. And this is a sign that are worth visiting. Just gorgeous. And Tallulah Bankhead, you're supposed to bring cigarettes and a bottle of bourbon and leave. This is Maryland's first women voters, an example of some of the signs that these women have named after them. And the Dorchester County Historical Society, who nicely let me use some photographs they have of Annie Oakley. So, the last set of people, notable women that I found, and there are other women out there. These are just ones that I found a lot of research on. People mentioned others to me. I've run out of space and time. Annie Lucier, do you know about her? She is from Kent County. She grew up, she was born in Canada of American citizens. Her father was a World War I ace pilot. They then moved to Kent County on a farm, which is today a bed and breakfast. And a really nice place to visit. The owner is so nice. He'll tell you all about her, and it has her autobiography, her book. She learned to fly from her father's friends, wanted to contribute in World War II. U.S. wasn't in World War II yet. Britain was. Because she was a British citizen, because she was born in Canada, she went to England under a program where if you were a British citizen living abroad, you could go to England and be part of the war effort there. She joined the Civilian Air Corps there, went to school, learned to fly. She then flew pilots' equipment around England and did run into Nazi planes at least once. When the U.S. entered the war, there was talk of an invasion. She was told that the women in their corps would not follow the troops to Europe, that the Civilian Air Corps was going to go behind the lines, the male pilots, and drop off supplies for the soldiers. But the women were to stay in England, the female pilots. Well, she didn't like that. So she had a friend of her father's that was helping the U.S. Start a CIA, the predecessor of the CIA. He offered her to become a spy handler in Europe. So she gave up flying. She joined this predecessor of the CIA, went to Algeria, went to Spain, went to France, where behind the troops, as the invasion happened, they identified German spies, convinced them to turn, and then she was a handler. She then went on to marry a Spaniard, live in Europe, divorced, they had kids, she divorced, she came back to the US to California, but she would still come back to the Eastern Shore, and one of the researchers said at 82 you could still see her or hear her flying across the Chesapeake because she loved to fly. Jane Hanks, our own Jane Hanks from Oxford. Julie, have you done any exhibits on Jane?
Not that I can remember.
Okay.
But we should, definitely.
Flying Tigers, right? The pre-US entry into the war, a lot of military pilots and civilian pilots, I forget how many there were. They went to China. The Chinese government paid them, but the US government supplied the planes and the equipment. Where they flew against the Japanese. She was one of 2 American nurses who went, and she describes in an interview that's online the conditions she experienced living in very primitive conditions in Burma and China, caring for the pilots. And I got some really good information on her from 2 older Oxford residents who knew her. Thank you, Julie. So, writers, I had to talk about writers. Sophie Kerr. Have you read any of Sophie Kerr's work? She was one of the most popular novelists of her time. And she wrote this about the Eastern Shore in one of her novels. She was born in Caroline County, moved to New York City, and I think she published over 300 articles, books, poems, whatever. And this is one of her novels, Sounds of Petticoats and Other Stories of the Eastern Shore. She wrote a lot with an Eastern Shore background. And here's how she described the people of the Eastern Shore: seem always agreeably pliable, acquiescent and gentle. We know better. Actually, they are strong and rigid, set in a pattern of extreme individualism, passionate and willful.
Not much has changed.
So, she's worth, the library has some of her books, or you can get them through Interlibrary Loan. It's worth reading, at least this one book. And the second writer, who I'm just researching now, is Sarah Elizabeth Wright from Wacomico County. She was an African-American woman, grew up very poor, and I didn't put her birth dates, but during the 1920s and 30s. there. She moved to Philadelphia. She was a poet. She decided she was a writer. She went to Howard and was exposed to Langston Hughes and a couple of other leading Black thinkers and writers. Didn't graduate, graduated from Philadelphia Teachers College, went on to write poetry, and she wrote one novel. And that novel is called, you can get it through here, this library, This Child's Gonna Live. And it was named by the New York Times as a book of the year in 1969. She died shortly afterwards. It was, somebody wrote one of the most painful novels that they've ever read, because it's about a Black family growing up on the Eastern Shore during the Depression. Black woman, Mariah, and her children dying because of the lack of access to health care, people starving. I mean, and this is how the novel starts. Sometimes the sun will come in making a bright yellow day, but then again, sometimes it won't. And this is how she viewed whites on the Eastern Shore, which is a little different than, well, I guess maybe as Sophie Kerr. The novel kind of faded into oblivion, and then in the 60s was rediscovered as females became involved in Black power, because our story is of a woman and what she experienced, not just from her husband, from other Black men, and from the white people who owned the land that they tilled potatoes on. So it's a very moving novel. It is depressing. Okay, and then we move on. Let's go here to Ruth Rose Artists and Julia Purnell. How many have been to Water's Edge Museum in Oxford? Okay, the Oxford and others contingent. Well, then you know about Ruth Rose, right, who painted pictures of the African American community that that lived there, and of her servants, the family servants. They were a wealthy family. And this is one of her photos. This is called Madonna and Child. She painted people with dignity and with respect in their daily lives. And if you get a chance to go there, you never know, you might run into Barbara Paca, who set up the exhibit, who will tell you all the background, or you could run into, somebody I was talking to told me this story where they went with two ministers and they ended up singing songs from freedom marches, because the ministers were involved in freedom marches with the staff there. So it's worth a trip. So she was just a wonderful, wonderful artist who painted the Black community there. She moved to New York, but she came back summers. Okay, just to finish up quickly, Julia Purnell, Snow Hill in Worcester County. If you haven't been to the Julia Purnell Museum, has anybody been there? Okay, what is she known for? Needlework, textile arts. At 85, she had an accident and was confined to a wheelchair. She did over 1,000 pieces of needlework till she died at 100. She won shows in New York and Philadelphia. And they have a lovely museum with the most wonderful director. Just look online before you travel there, because it's closed certain times of the year. And then, of course, Gloria Richardson, civil rights activist, right, from Cambridge. And it should be Reverend Denise Grubb, who also Both of them co-directed the SNA Student National Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And then Women on the Water. Our own Harriet Vallant from Sharks Island, who, when her husband died in the 1800s, she took over running the lighthouse, and she asked the federal government, she told the federal government she wanted the same salary as her husband, and they gave it to her. And that was hard work, believe me, running the lighthouse in those days. And Water Woman. I just found out yesterday about a water woman who had recently died, because there's lots of books on water women, and they're all alive. It's very hard to find a historical captain of a tugboat, or a captain or first mate on a oyster boat. It's just skipjack. It's very hard to find. So I'm still looking for another water woman. If anybody has ideas, please. And what Mary and I did, that was Gloria Richardson, her famous photo in Cambridge. She was a powerful, brave woman. There's Sharks Island, which has disappeared, but it was 700 acres in the 1800s. Mary and I did a map of the original women, not all these women. I'm going to make it more professional and expanded for the book, where, you can go visit those places, and that's what the handout is. And there's some lovely places to take road trips on the Eastern Shore to honor these women. And that's it. So. Interested in, the book will probably come out this fall. I have some sign-up sheets. You can put your name and email, and I'll just send you information on it. Any questions? I kind of went through it quickly, but.
You're going to make copies for us?
Yeah, she's making copies. Now, that's some of the women, not all of them. Okay, well, yes.
How does a lady like yourself, obviously New York, you speak with the accent, I'm Eastern Shore native, I don't have an accent. Why did you become interested in the women locally?
Well, first of all, I married a man from Maryland. And we've been here since 2008. As I said, I started volunteering at the Oxford Library and looking at all these history books and getting a little frustrated because it was all about Anthony Johnson, not Mary Johnson, or, Frederick Douglass, not Anna Murray Douglass. So that's how I became interested in it, and Mary egged me on. And I have to thank my husband, too. Yes?
Were you able to find photographs of all the ones from photography forward?
I have, and I'm in the process of getting permission to use the photographs. Everybody has been helpful except for Tallulah Bankhead. Most of her photos are owned, well, first of all, if they're before 1929, you can use them in copyright laws. After that, the Tallulahs are owned by a London agency that charges $100 a photograph, no matter what. They're the only one. The kindness of other people has been incredible, just incredible. Well, thanks everybody for coming.